to digitize for 3D embroidery or for foam, basically there's a couple of things that you need to do in order to set your design up to work for foam. Before we get into it, the two main things are that you have to change your density, and you have to close off any open areas in your design. Now, so when you're digitizing, the digitizing is not any different than digitizing for anything else. And when it comes to lettering, again, almost all the fonts can still be used. So we'll go T for text. Right now we're just going to stick with the standard satin. We'll pick our font and we'll type in some lettering. Now, if this is going to be used for foam, when you're when you're doing this for foam, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So, when you generate your stitches on this design, what happens is you lay the foam down and you put the stitch and you sew the stitches over it. Well, the needle penetrations along here and along here are actually cutting the foam, okay? But this area and this area and any area like that in your design, the foam is not being cut, okay? So when you're doing a design for foam, you want to look at particularly those areas. Now, as I said, one of the things that you have to do is you have to adjust your density. So for foam, I'm going to go in here and adjust my satin density down to 0.18. Okay? That is the only time that I ever use a density that's that tight. Okay? Now, the other thing that I do is I turn off my underlay. So I'm going to go to satin settings, 0.18, turn off my underlay. Now, watch what's going to happen to my stitches when I regenerate them. Right now, this shows me I'm at 1,809 stitches. When I regenerate, I'm at 2,937. So my stitch count has greatly increased based on the fact that I chose to use foam. Now, that's the first thing that I've got to do, is I've got to adjust my density. The other thing that I need to do is I've got to close off these ends. Okay? Now, because I need it to cut the foam. Now, how do I close off the ends? Well, there's two ways that we could go about doing it. Some people use a method where they will actually go in and add points. And what they'll do is they'll use what's called the pinch method. Now, what that does is it pinches off the end of your satin, therefore cutting the foam. Okay? That's one method. This is called the pinch method. And actually, and you can see that my stitch is there, there, there. That's cutting the foam for me. Okay? And if you look, we actually have a font designed for foam. It's in the F's. It's called foam. If you look at that font closely, you will see that it uses the pinch method. Now, it pinches it together and cuts the foam. So if we zoom in, see how the stitches, see how the outline of my lettering comes to a point there and there. And so that will cut your foam that way. And so that's one method of getting the foam cut in your open areas. Okay? Now, the other method that I'm a little bit more of a fan of is where I'll take and I'll go in and actually create a satin stitch in any open areas. So I'm digitizing a satin stitch, and then I'll take a running stitch and I'll run around to up here. Let me put this back the way it was. And then I'll do another satin stitch. And I just cover the edge, just come out to the edge just a little bit right there. Now, when I do this method, obviously, after this section comes this section. Okay? So what how I want it to stitch out is let's go past all that. All right, it does this section, does my running stitch around to here, does this section, and then it does the top. And so now you can see that right here we've got cut for our foam, and up here we've got a cut area for our foam. Takes a little more time, but really closes off and finishes off your stitch very nicely. So then I would come in here to my S, I would do one here, do a running stitch up to there, do one there, then do the top of the S. And then I'd come to the U and I'd do one across here, running stitch around to up here, and then do my U. Now my other S, I can always copy and paste just like I could do anything else. So I could copy and paste, I wouldn't have to do that S again. But that's the sequence that you want it. You want it to cut any open areas and then sew the top stitching. Okay? Now, that's all for single color foam designs. What happens if I have a two-color foam design? Two-color foam designs are a little bit different than just your one color, in that what they do is typically when you have a font or something that you're doing a border on or making two color, then you do the character and then you do the font on top of it. Okay? I'm sorry, you do the font and then you do the border on top of it. That's typically how you normally work. Well, with foam, you do it opposite. Okay? The border part to your puffy foam design is going to stitch first, and then your foam is going to go on top of it. So it's really different than what normal two-color lettering or two-color designs are set up. Now, I can still use the same tools. So, for example, I can come over here, grab my G, go to Outlines, Borders, Satin around satin, give it a width, give it a color, and say OK. Now, look at my border. First off, this would never really work as a regular design because see how wide my border is, and it's really covering up my letter. Okay? But that's okay for a foam design because what I want is I'm going to take this and I'm going to reorder it to the start of my design. I'm going to regenerate my stitches, and now look how it stitches out. Now, this blue part is just a regular satin. You're not going to do two-color foam, okay? You're going to sew a regular satin border, okay? This is the blue. Then, and I might, go in and I'll probably do all my blue. So I'll do the S and I'll do the U and I'll do all the letters. I'll do them all as blue, and then I'm going to come back in over the top and start my foam. I'll stitch out the blue, hit stop on my machine, cut my rectangle of foam, whatever color it is, lay it down, and the first thing that should sew after I lay it down is this little satin stitch right here, then my running stitch, then my satin here, and then this stitch. And then the next thing will be the same repeated process on the S and the U and the S and the A. Okay? So it's all, the process is the same once I get to that point. So now I have customers that use foam on fill stitches. That's fine. You can do that. With a fill stitch, if you're doing foam, if you want this to be foam, again, you don't have to worry about it cutting the edge because it's going to cut the edge, but you do want your density to be, instead of 0.4, you want it to be 0.18. Okay, so you want it to be extremely tight on that as well. Now again, that's the only thing you're ever going to use that tight of a density for. Okay? Nothing else. If you're doing a border, now I've seen people do regular satins on top of here. Okay? So like some satin detail, whatever it is. All right? That's going to be just a regular old satin stitch, not a super tight density like our satins over here. Okay? When you're putting something on top, it's going to be a regular type of a stitch. Okay? So, does anybody have any questions on working with foam? Now, aside from the digitizing, once you finish sewing, once you finish stitching it out and you pull that foam off, you're going to be left with these, for lack of a more technical term, fuzzies all over the top. Okay? Different foams react differently, but they all typically leave stuff on the top of the design. Here's the way you get rid of that. You take that piece that you've just embroidered, and you put it near something extremely hot. Typically, I recommend taking a hair dryer and setting it on its hottest setting and blowing it with a hair dryer. And what that does, that takes that puffy foam and sucks it back up underneath those stitches. So by sucking it underneath, it removes all those fuzzies laying out there. Be careful. I mean, you can use anything that's hot. People have put, taken it and set it up against, up near, not up against, but up close to a space heater. Anything that puts off heat. You can get too hot, okay? A heat gun, it'll do it, but if you're not careful, it'll get so hot that it'll actually melt that foam. So, there is a limitation there. You don't want it to get super hot so that it starts to melt your foam. So, any questions on doing foam? Okay.
Hey, on the fill stitch, doesn't that hold or pull the foam down?
Not as much as you would think.
Yeah, I've never seen that.
Yeah, I tell you, I've seen it several times with. Actually, I had a few customers out in the West that used to do it a lot, but I've got a customer in South, in Georgia actually, that they do tons of baseball hats, and they use a lot of fill for their base. Like, for example, actually I had them make me one that had a Indian head on it, and the Indian chief head, and so the base was a fill, but it was over foam, and then they came back in with the different color and put the feather, the detail in the feathers and the headdress and the face and all that over the top of it. But their base was just an Indian chief head, like a circle almost, covered over a piece of foam, and then the satin detail on top. So
I see.
So yeah, it's something I would probably experiment with before I committed to an order, but yeah, it's definitely doable.
Yeah. What width do you use or thickness of foam?
To be honest with you, I don't try to sew a whole lot of foam. So it's just a matter of, I like the foam that Gnold sells pretty well, and they have two thicknesses there. So it just depends on the look you're trying to go with.
I see.
The feathers, no, the feathers, they weren't. They were just, the feathers were the same color as the face on the Indian head, and the detail around the feathers and going through the feathers was a different color. Matter of fact, I can show you the regular design, not the 3D version, but I'll show you the just the regular version of it here. Let's see. Maybe. Oh, there it is. This was the regular version of the design, and what they did was they went in and took this part and made it foam, and it's all made up of several different sections of fill, but they made that part foam, and then this part over here, the gold and the blue, was just typical regular satins on top of there.
Oh.
So So, moving along, if there's no other questions on foam, the next thing we're going to talk about is applique. Okay, we're going to go over applique. Applique can be very simple. It can help you. It can help you reduce your stitch count, and it can really enhance the look of your design. Navy foam, oh, you couldn't just use black? Not really. Have you checked with, let's see, have you checked Ganol? I don't know, I'm not sure what they have, but Ganol USA might be an option to check with. Tell you, if you'll hold 1 second, I can probably. Well, 2 millimeters is just thinner. You know, you've got whatever size they come in. Hold on 1 second. I'll tell you for sure. But the millimeter is just the thickness of the foam, and so however thick you want it. Let's see. 3 millimeter. 3 millimeter is fine. It's just not going to give you, you know, it's not going to be as thick. Now, some people double it up. All right. Some people will take and use 2 layers. Let's see. Okay. It doesn't show me my colors. Just have to check with them and see. I'm not sure. It doesn't show. Let's see what this does.
I never even thought about doubling it up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can definitely double it up.
So maybe
That's how
the
they get
best
it.
way
That's how they get it thicker.
Yeah. Because the 3M is thicker than the 2M, isn't it? Or is the 2M thicker?
No, the 3M is thicker. Yes, exactly. 3M is thicker.
That's what I.
Yeah. Ganol does have a dark blue, but it's you're right. It is 2 mil. But again, what you can do with that is double it up. Yeah.
Well, excellent idea.
All right.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. So let's go on and talk about applique. Now, applique designs can come from a lot of different places. Okay? Typically, people buy applique designs. They'll have a cutter. They'll get designs made from like stalls and places like that. But it's a huge asset to your design. Now, I'm just going to come out here and say this. The way that I teach applique is not the way a lot of people teach applique. A lot of people, if you go to websites like Applique Cafe and things like that, the way they teach you to do applique, I I am not a fan of, and I really stress that, to me, that's not a good way to do it. The way they teach you to do it is you hoop up your garment, or your whatever you're stitching on. You sew a stitch, you lay your applique on top, you sew a stitch, you take the hoop out of the machine, you trace around, you cut around it with scissors, put it back on the machine, and put a cover stitch down there. Again, if you use this method and it works, great. But for me, in my opinion, that is hugely dangerous, because
Time-consuming.
very time-consuming, but also the chances of that popping out of the hoop or slipping, or you're not getting the hoop in the right spot, it runs a lot of risk to do that. The way I like to do applique is, first off, if you have a cutter, then that's great. If you have a knife cutter or an aisle line or a laser cutter or any of those, then you basically are starting with your outline file. You know, that outline file is your cut file, the same one that you're using for your knife or your aisle line or whatever. You're bringing that file into Ethos, and you are adding a running stitch and a satin stitch border around it. Okay? Now, the way I like to do it is, let's say, so if I've got a cutter, I've got my pieces cut out, I've got my mark out, my outline stitch. I'm going to bring it into Ethos. I'm going to put a running stitch. I'm going to take that outline stitch, and I'm going to make it into a running stitch mark outline. And then I'm going to put a cover stitch. Now I can put a cover stitch with a zigzag, a satin, or another running. And we'll talk about all three of those. So that's one way that we can do it. We've got our cut pieces. Another way is we could, if we're doing a bunch and we don't have any of those cutters, and I've got to do 2 dozen, then I'm going to call a cutting company. I mean, there's cutting companies across the United States, from tons on the West Coast area to, Midwest. You got Stalls up in Detroit. You've got cutters here in the South. So there's tons of companies where you can call up and say, hey, I need, X number of this, and you can provide the file, they can provide the file, however you want to work it, and you can get them cut. Okay? It's cost effective. You don't have to have a cutter, but yet you get good quality cut pieces. Anytime you ever need a source for that, you'll email me or call me. I'll be glad to give you sources all over the United States for cutting services. So that's another way. The third way is you've only got to do a few. You don't want to pay somebody. You don't have a cutter, but you need a couple of these applique done. 6, 12, 2, whatever it is. Small numbers usually. Well, so you say, okay, well, I want to cut them myself by hand. Not a problem. A lot of people do it. Heck, if I've only got 1 or 2 to do, I'll do it myself. Here's the way I do it. I start my design with a running stitch. So, for example, again, and I know this is digitizing, but let's just say it was a letter that I had to do. Okay? I'm going to hit T for text. I'm going to turn off this T, and I want it to be a running letter. Okay? Now, we give you a bunch of letters like this freshman. We're going to say, okay, let's say that this was my applique. I only had to do 1 or 2. I didn't want to send it off to be cut, and I don't have a cutter. All right? Well, right now, it's strictly a running stitch. All right? So, what I want to do is I'm going to take the fabric that's going to be the applique, whatever the material is, and I'm going to hoop that by itself. I'm going to take this running stitch and I'm going to stitch it onto that fabric. And again, if I had to do 2 or 3 or whatever, I might, set it up so that I could do 2 or 3 on the same hooping without having to continue to rehoop. Now, then I can take it out, unhoop it, use my scissors, and I have got a nice line to follow to cut this out. Okay? So I can just cut along my line, cut it out, be ready to go. Now, once I have it cut out, I'm going to go back to this design. Now, I've got my running stitch. Now I've got to cover it. Okay? I've got to come in here and put a border on it to hold it down. And there's lots of different borders that you can work with. Traditionally, when people used applique, they would use a zigzag or a satin border. Still used today. A lot of people do that. Athletics. They're putting names and numbers with applique on the back of jerseys. They use an open zigzag stitch. Okay? Fraternity houses. You see tons of Greek letters across the chest that they use a full satin stitch to hold it down. But the other way is you can actually go in and do another running stitch to hold it down. If you go into the mall and you go to Abercrombie and Fitch, they have tons of applique, but they very, very rarely use a standard zigzag or satin to hold it down. They're using a running stitch, some sort of specialty stitch, and they're leaving an exposed edge to give it that more distressed look. No, when you cut it out, you're cutting out right on the line. Okay, you want to be as close as possible to that stitch line that it's stitched out. All right? Because what's going to happen is you're going to use that running stitch later. Once you've hooped up your shirt or your sweatshirt or whatever, the first thing that sews is that same running stitch. Now, once you sew out the running onto your finished garment, you're taking that U that you just cut out by hand and you're laying it and lining it up right along this running stitch that you stitched out. Okay? Now, I'm going to come in and put a border on it. I can make it as wide or as narrow as I want. But remember, the narrower you are, the more chances you're going to have to miss. You want a nice, beefy, wide satin stitch to make sure it catches. Okay? That's your traditional satin right there. Now, I used 2.3 right at 3 millimeters. So now I know when I select this one and this one, instead of clicking and dragging, I'm pressing the N key, typing in 3, and saying OK. Now, for all technical purposes, this design is ready for applique. All right? When you watch it stitch out, it's going to stitch out the U, the S, and the A. Whoop. Once it finishes the A, we're stopping the machine. We're pressing our hoop feed button. That'll push the frame out. We're taking that hand-cut USA We're spraying it with a spray adhesive like a 505 or a KK or whatever you get your spray adhesive. We're laying it down, making sure it's good and even, making sure it matches up really good. Then, once we're done, we're covering it. We've created our cover stitch. We've laid them down. We've stuck them really well. And we're starting the machine back up. Now, what it's doing right now is a zigzag stitch. Okay? That right there is I like to use that as my underlay for my satins when I'm doing applique. It's like a tack down or a hold down stitch. Okay? It's done that. It's holding it down. Now it's going to come in here and do the top stitching. When it gets to the S, it's going to do the same thing. Whoops. Now it's doing the tack down or the hold down stitch. When it's done, it's going to do the cover stitch. Okay? That's the traditional satin. Now, if I didn't want a traditional satin, I could use a zigzag. There's a zigzag stitch. Now this is just a pet peeve of mine, but I want to show you something. If I know going in that I'm going to use this zigzag stitch, then when I make my border, around my letter, I click on it, I go to Outlines, Borders, Make Satin Border, I press the N key. Alright, if I know that I'm going to use an open zigzag, like on this U over here, I want this number to be very high. 85% is what I like to use. And I'll tell you why. When you sew this out as a zigzag, see how by making it 85, my stitch just goes outside just a little bit onto my garment. Over here I didn't change it. And see how it's about 50% out? Well, here's the thing. When you're doing an open zigzag like that, if you do it this way, to where you have a lot of stitches, a lot of the stitch hanging out past your piece of applique, then it's going to look real jagged and sawtoothed. This way, you've only got a tiny little bit hanging out past your applique. It's not going to get that sawtooth look when you stitch it out. So what you do when you're putting your border on here, you hit your N key to put the size in, you change this value. 50% is what it was. 85 is what we want. Say OK. And let's make it a zigzag. Okay. There's my cover stitch. Okay. Now, third type of stitch is going to be a running stitch. people come in. There it is. Okay? That's all they need to hold the applique down. You're doing the rough edge, that distressed look. There you go. Okay? That's going to give you that roughed edge. Now that's just the basic running. There are so many other options for that. For example, we can come over here to this icon, Stitch Effect Editor. We can click on Load Effects, and we can choose our running library. Now all of these stitches in here can be used to hold our applique down. E-stitch, these two right here, very popular. There's no rule that says any of these can't be used. There's another E-stitch there. Something like this, where I can take this border, shorten my stitch length, and that can become my applique border. Okay? I can go in and use any of those to give myself a different look, a different feel to my applique. I could use this even if I wanted a nice clean edge. I could still use this for my border. All right. Now, if you're doing multi-layer applique, it's the same process. You know, here we've got our original. That's what we started with right there. Well, I can go in now. Let me get rid of this. Now, there's my two color. Okay? My two color letter. Well, what I have to do is I have to do the blue first. I'll do a running stitch, then I'll come in, and I might do all my blues. If it was USA, I might do my blue U, my blue S, my blue A. Do my running stitch, lay down my cut piece, come back in, and put my border on there. All right. Then, once I've done the blue and held it down with all the, zigzag and all that, then I'll come back in to this one. I'll have it sew the running stitch that I've got right there, stop the machine, place my pieces, lay my pieces down, and there's my two color. Okay, so it's the same process. You just have to do all the bottom, and then you come back in and do all the top. Okay? All right. So, anybody have any questions on working with an applique?
No, but it looks a lot easier than what I thought it would be.
To to be honest with you, it is if you take your time and focus on it, it is a very simple process. Not to make it sound too easy, but you have a running stitch and you have a cover stitch, and that's it. I use that running stitch. I'll either have the running stitch already done for me because I've either cut it or had it cut, or I make the running stitch and that's where I start, and I'll sew that onto my fabric that's eventually going to be my applique so that I know where to cut it out. That's the first part, that running stitch, very crucial. The second part is, how am I going to cover it? Satin, zigzag, specialty running. One of those three. It can only be one of those three. If it's a satin, whether it's an open zigzag or a true satin, I put my border on there, and I'm ready to go.
Now, if you've never used the adhesive, doesn't that stick the machine?
It depends on the adhesive that you use, but like the 505 brand, I've just heard lots of people talk about how it does not gum up their needles at all.
Okay.
Gnold sells a brand called KK100. It's supposed to be, pretty machine friendly too. What I would do though, if I were you, and once I've done it and I'm finished with my applique and I have used that adhesive, I would probably get something and clean my needle. Either change my needles out or clean my needles. Okay. Because you probably will have, no matter what you use, some sort of residue left over there. Okay. And when you're spraying that, like when you're spraying the letters to stick them down, don't spray it near the machine. Take yourself an old cardboard box and spray into that box. So just set you up a cardboard box on a table or on your garbage can and hold your letter in the corner, by hand or with tweezers or whatever, and spray into that box. That way you can throw that box away or put it away to use it later or whatever. Okay?
Right. Thank you.
Okay. No problem. And then what I like to do, if I'm feeling really creative, is I'll go around and I'll go to the fabric store and I'll walk around and I'll look and I'll try to find materials that can become, applique. I created a design. I wish I could show you a photograph of it. That is the word ethos. And there's a font called Critter. Critter is every letter is a different animal. And so the E is an eel, and the T is a tiger, and the H is a hare, and the O is an otter, and the S is a seahorse. So that's what they look like when you type them out. So I went to the fabric store, and I got fabric that looked like eel skin and so on. And so I made each letter that actual fabric, and it turned out pretty cool. It's a nice design. I had it on I used to put it on display at my trade show booths and all that. Anyway, it's sitting here above my desk now, but pretty cool. So, those are the kind of things that you can really be creative with. You go to the fabric store and walk around, and a lot of times fraternities, not fraternities, but sororities, places like that, are looking for all kinds of different unique specialty fabrics to sew down. Like embroidery machine repair? Yeah, I do. I know several people. What part of the West Coast are you? North or south? In the Los Angeles area or Northern California? Oregon. Let me think for 1 second. I got a guy in Northern California that's really good. His name is Carl Berkey. His number is 916-826-8464. And again, his name is Carl Berkey. And if he can't help you, he could probably steer you in the right direction. Yeah, he owns CES now. He used to work for CES, but I think Brennan, who used to own it, I think he's retired, and I think Carl is the owner now. So, I mean, if you want somebody else, I can look for somebody else, but I know him. So, anyway, all right. Next, again, we've only got 5 of us. So, next we're going to talk about bringing in and doing auto conversion. Okay, we'll do the auto conversion, and then whatever we have time left for, we'll do some basic digitizing after that. I mean, is this okay for you guys as far as what we're doing? I mean, this is not our typical class, but I know that I think everybody has been through the class at least once or twice. So if this is not okay, if you want me to go back to the old format, I'll be glad to do that. Okay. All right. So now we're going to talk about using the auto conversion tools. Okay. I would never sit here and tell anybody that auto conversion is the end-all be-all to getting your design done. That's why they're called tools. It's a tool to help you get done faster, but not gonna, it's not always going to work. It's not always going to work for your application. But the way I look at it is, if it works on one section or one thing, that's just one thing left. It's not very friendly. But hopefully we'll go through and some of the features, and you can kind of get a better idea of how it's supposed to work. Okay. Sometimes, I had a design the other day that I auto-converted that I didn't have to do any editing. It just depends on, like anything else, it depends on your artwork. I mean, I'll start by showing you a design that a customer wanted me to take a look at. Whoops. Hold on. Bear with me 1 second. I lost it. All right, we'll start with a vector file. All right, this right here is a vector file that we brought in. Just so happens to be it was an AI file. Now, first thing is, when I'm working with a vector file that I'm going to digitize on top of or auto-convert, for me, it's hard to see the layering. It's hard to see what layers go where. Okay? So, under the View menu, under Options, we have this feature. It's called Auto Vector Fill. You can see that mine's turned on. That's why I can see what this design is going to look like. Now, by looking at this design, I can kind of get a feel for my layering or how it's going to be laid out. Okay? Now, I can turn that off. Okay? But see, sometimes vector designs can be very difficult to work with when you're working in this view right here. Okay? Now, real simple, I can use this toolbar along the right edge. All right, right now you'll notice everything is grayed out. I can do Control A, select all. This will convert the whole design straight to embroidery without me having any control at all. Okay? Now, sometimes I might want to do that. But for me, I'm probably not going to auto-convert the letters. Okay? It just goes back to I just have more confidence in my lettering that comes with Ethos than I do auto-converting these letters, especially on the very bottom where it says by Peacock Alley. I'm not sure I follow you, Jeff. What do you mean, how about the color? So, now, I'm coming over here. I'm zooming in. Now, before I went Control A, and that selected everything, and this button become active. Now I could come in here and left click on the edge of the section that I want, and it'll put a box around it. Or, sorry, my phone was going off there. That was a pretty bad one. Huh.
I thought it was my dog.
Or I can go into my snapshot and look at it section by section down here. Okay? Now in the snapshot, if you right click in here, you've got this option right here. I tend to use this option quite a bit because when I'm actually digitizing, or when I'm to the point where I'm done with these vectors, then I'll do just embroidery only. But right now, I want to see it section by section. Now, I've got this piece, and I've got this piece. Those two are the same color. I want to convert those to embroidery. Well, I can auto do it right here, auto stitch, or I can use these three buttons down here. Convert it to a running, convert it to a satin, or convert it to step. Now, I'll be honest with you, I've already done this design. I did this design for a customer earlier in the week, and they asked me to do it all in with auto conversion without digitizing anything. So I did the whole thing in auto conversion, didn't make any changes. I didn't do the lettering. I told them up front that I wasn't going to do the lettering. I was going to type it in, but everything else I auto converted it. And they came back and said that it turned out really nice. So I already know this is going to work. So I've got these two sections. Convert vectors to step. Click it. Generate my stitches. There we go. Those sections are done. I do personal classes. My next personal class is next month. It's in Atlanta, and it is, hold on, I'll tell you the dates. It's the 12th and 13th of July is my next regular class. So, I've done these two sections. Now I'm ready for this section. Now, this section and this section, maybe they're the same, maybe they're a little different. It's kind of hard to say, but I can come in here and grab them, convert them. Now, if I want it to be a little different, then I can take this one, give it a different sewing angle. That'll give it just a little different sheen there. Okay? Now, I don't get too close to Maine too often.
That's nice.
I'm sorry. I would love to. I would actually love to go to Maine. Actually, that's probably one of the very few states that I've actually never been to, and I'd like to do it, but I no.
We have extra rooms and extra bathroom. You're more than welcome.
Oh, okay. Maybe one of these days I will get up that way. I wish they'd do some shows up that way, and that would give me a good excuse to go up there anyway.
You ever do New Jersey?
Yeah, well, I was in Atlantic City for a week, about 2 months ago.
Wow.
We did the Atlantic City, the Atlantic City ISS show rolls around, every year. And so we're always up there for that. So, you never know. Probably it's a good chance that we could hold a special class. And what I might do is if I could get enough people that would want to do it and just charge a very nominal fee just to cover my travel expenses, for, several different companies, it might make it feasible to do. So we might do that. We'll think about that.
Thank you.
So we go through, and we just basically go through and pick the sections and convert it to what we want to convert it to. This blue section here, I might convert it to a fill, or I might convert it to a satin. It would work. It's pretty small. It would work as a satin. And so I'll come in here, and I try to do them by color. That way I don't have too many color changes. That's the one thing that you've got to be careful of when using these two options here. See, it doesn't care about production. It's not trying to be production friendly. It's trying to auto convert. And if the way this was created, if we look down here at our snapshot, this was created first, this was created second. Well, when it auto converts it, if you just auto convert the whole thing, at once, that's the way it's going to do it. So those lines that you see on the screen jumping around, I mean, look, I've got 1 color change, 2 color changes, 3 color changes, 4 color changes in the first 4 colors. So I've got all those jumps in there. So if we take our time and we say, okay, look, instead of having the system just figure it all out, let's take a little bit more time and say, okay, when it does this piece, I want it to do this piece as well. Okay, I've got those 2 pieces selected. I'll convert just those 2 pieces. And I can use this button up here. It's all based on what I have selected. Now, we've got this piece. Hold down my Shift key, and this piece. 2 pieces selected, 2 objects. Even if I use this button, that's okay. It's going to do just what I have selected, okay? Convert it. Stitch it out. And now basically, well, I haven't done this little piece right here. I forgot that piece. But other than that, and other than the lettering, this is done. Now, all that was a fill stitch, okay? This lettering was going to need to be a satin. So again, here, satin conversion. Okay, here, satin, satin. Now, I can use my Shift key and get more than one. Okay? What, when you go to satin, that's where you mess up? Satin can be a lot trickier than typical fills. 99.9% of the time when I do a fill, it's going to work fine. It's when I do a satin that I'm not a big fan of how it turns out. It might do 3 letters perfect, and then all of a sudden it's going to do a letter that you probably think, well, that's going to be easy to do, and it doesn't do it. So you have to be wary of the fact that doing a satin takes a lot more than doing your fill. Yeah, exactly. Look at my O. There's several spots in this O that, well, they're not too bad, but I'm not 100% crazy about it. Okay? Probably, if we stitched it out, not many people would notice, but we're seeing on the screen, and that actually, to be honest, is one of the better ones. Okay? Sometimes you're going to get things that, and I'll try to maybe, well, I don't know if I can make it do it, but I'll try to make it do it like with this M here. Well, it's too small, it just made it a running stitch. But, you know, some letters, they're just not going to work. It's just not going to be able to calculate the way it needs to be. So you have to kind of, you know, take it with a grain of salt and say, look, it did all these letters, but I have to do this one. You know, again, going back to this, I would use my fonts anyway because I know what kind of consistency that I'm going to get out of that. But, you know, again, it's a tool for you to use. Now, that's when you're working with a vector file. You've got these three buttons, and you've got this button right here. Okay? The other type of file that you can convert is a bitmap type or a JPEG type file. All right? If we go in and we take a bitmap or a JPEG and we import it, then we can auto-convert that as well. Now, I'll be honest, I don't use that very often because, again, it's all about how good the logo is, and typically the logos that you bring in that are JPEGs are not that good. Once you bring it in, just like before, you want to size it. Well, I hope this one's pretty good. Now I've gone through insert image and I want to size it. Right now it's 75 by 71 or 74.95. That's actually a pretty decent size for a left chest. Okay? So my sizing's good. Now, I do have, it is off a little bit because of this white over here. I could use this icon, crop, and come in here, click and drag a box. Once I make my box, I press the enter key. Right click to get out. Now, that gives me more of an accurate representation of the actual size because I've got rid of those extra boxes around there. Okay? Now, here's the thing. I can auto-convert this, okay? Or I can auto-convert parts of it. But before I do that, a couple of things that I want to do. I want to reduce it down to the base number of colors. This design has got 3 colors in it: blue, white, and gold. I'm going to go here, reduce color image, principal color reduction, and I can actually, I'll take it down to about 10. Okay? We lost part of my gold. All right, that's why you got to be careful with that. But the nice thing is that you can go in and now you can adjust your color palette. So I can come back in here and add back in that gold if I can find it. I might not be able to. Let's just bring it in again. Before I convert it, I want to reduce it down. Okay, and then I can go in and use and merge these colors as well. Hey, it's 2:43. Let's do this real quick. Let's take a quick, just a couple minute break here. We went through our break. We'll be, let's just take a 5-minute break and then we'll continue on. Okay. All right. So, first thing is when I'm auto converting a image file like this, I want to make sure that I'm reduced down to the primary number of colors. And by using my control key, I can merge the colors together and adjust my color palette. Okay? Now, again, I can use this to do the whole design. Alright? I click it, and it's going to go through the conversion process. Once it's done, then I can go in and make my edits. Now, this is where I have to agree with some of the users out there that there can be a lot of changes that you need to make. One of my biggest issues with converting this is not even remotely close to the way that I would do it if I were truly digitizing it. So, to me, image conversion is a very limited tool. Alright? It does it. You can stitch it out. You'll be able to stitch it out. All that good stuff. You can make changes to it. Things like that. But I would never have digitized it the way excuse me, that this is auto-converting it. Okay? It's almost done. We'll let it go ahead and finish up, and then we'll go in and evaluate and look at the design and see what parts are worth salvaging, what parts we might have to go back in and redigitize ourselves. Now, there it is right there. Alright? First and foremost, I would never void out lettering. Okay? It's put our border behind this fill. You know, again, there might be some of these pieces that I can actually really use, but let's go back to our original design and look at it the way we would normally go in and digitize it. First off, this design doesn't have voids in it. The K is embroidery, and Key Club International is embroidery as well. When I do this navy blue, I need to do it first. Okay? It's going to be a fill stitch. It's going to give me a nice base so that the K and the word Key Club International have something to sit on. I don't want that void like this. I want that to be filled in because I want that base there for that lettering. Now I can separate it out, and I would do that. What I would do is, if I were truly going to digitize this for production, first thing that's going to stitch out is this navy blue circle. I'm not going to void underneath for that letter. I'm going to choose my fill stitch tool. I'm going to put in a line point, curve point, right. What did I just do? Let me do that again. My fill stitch tool, line point, curve point, right click. There's my first part of this design, my circle. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create another circle. I'm going to come inside this border. Now, I'm going to take this, I'm going to take this, I'm going to go to step shape cutaway. Now I've got my two fill sections and they don't void each. There's a void, so there's not a lot of overlap. They don't waste any stitches in between there. Now, if I want them to be different, great. Grab this one, give it a different sewing angle. Okay? Now they're going to stand out different from each other. All right? Now, I'm ready to come in here and start doing the white. I could use a font and manipulate it. I could come in here, T for text, find me a font that looks like that. Now what I can do, bring this font over, and I can manipulate my points. Come in here, pull this down, pull this point down here. Now, I've got to evaluate and decide whether or not it's worth doing this or just recreating it. Okay, so I've got to determine which one's better, works better for me. As much time as I'm going to end up spending recreating it, might work out better to just redigitize it. Now I've got my K almost done. Now I can use my circle text to do the lettering, but then I'm going to have to come in here and digitize the gold. There's my K. All right. I moved the exit point on that. Now, something we haven't done. We've been working on this design for 5 or 10 minutes. We've not saved it one time. Save as. New design in my database. We'll just say K Club. Now my auto save is going to kick in because I've saved it one time. Okay? Yeah, I mean, it would be, yeah, exactly. I'd probably redo it too. It just depends on how much editing and changing I had to do to get it to look right. All right. So now, if I wanted to do Key Club International, first thing I need to know is how tall are the letters. Tools and show length. Measure the height. 5.52. Always cheat up. 5.52 becomes 6. Okay? T for text. Circle text. Left click. Whoops. Sorry. I need to know where the center of this is. Well, I'll use this and I'll say X marks the spot. Okay? So now I'm going to go T for text, circle text, start here, create my circle. I didn't do a very good job. I can still grab and move these points. Alright, we know it was 6 tall. determined that already. This font is in the C's. It's called Cooper. Cap locks are on. Key club. Now, if I want it to match exact or close, I can grab these points, pull them back here, pull them here, use my condensed width. Okay? Now, remember I use circle text. Enter. Here's the bottom of my circle. Alright, we've got to adjust it too. It goes to here, goes to here, and it goes to about here. International. Now, wrong font, wrong size. 6. Cooper. Come on, computer. Too long. Alright. So I'm highlighting it. Condense width. Now here's my key club. Now, for me, it's a little thinner. It's a little bit thinner than I like. I want it to be consistent. I've got it all selected. I'm going to go to my expand satin. I'm going to bump it up once, maybe twice. Probably not more than 2, okay? That's just going to beef it up a little bit. It's going to thicken it up. All right? Save. At least at this point I've got all that done. Now, I've got to do my key. It's a satin. I'm not sure. I'm going to measure 1.45. Now I've got a good idea for the width. I'm going to start with a running stitch. I hate ovals. I can come in here, make a circle, turn that circle into an oval. Oh, wait a minute. We never changed the parallel offset from when we were doing applicating. Now, I don't need that running stitch anymore. And I want this to exit here. Now I could do all kinds of fancy things to make that little bar there, but all I really have to do, point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint. We'll make this color 3. Now, there we go. Now I need to get around and do the bottom of this key. I'm going to use my running stitch in my 3rd color. I'm going to run around this edge. I would prefer to do that than having the machine stop, cut, and trim. I can use a trim, That's fine. That's 10 seconds, assuming that there's no thread pull out to do that trim. Very unlikely you'll see this stitch. Whoops. I actually wanted to come down here and do this part first. Now, this key is going to be a little tricky. Do we do a fill stitch? Do we do a satin stitch? If we do a fill, easy enough. Now, I want these lines are going to be nice and straight. O, 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 right click, right click. There's my key. Back to a satin. Point, counterpoint, point, counterpoint. All the way up. You want a straight line? O, O. Right click twice. Now, we're ready for the border around the K. Well, easy. Outlines, borders, satin around satin. It's awful small. I'm going to go with 1. We'll say color 3 because we know that's what we're working on. Okay. There's my border. Probably going to have to tweak it a little bit, especially in some of these corners. Even at 1, it was too wide on the corners. Okay. Pull it in. I check them all. Now, I can take this one put a border on it. Make it the same color. Stitch it out. I didn't fix this corner, but you get the idea there. All right, now I'm left with this border. Okay? I'm going to have to do, unfortunately, because of the way this is, there's 2 ways that I can do this. I could make me a satin border and then come back in with a running stitch and do the scallops. The problem with that, which that's the easy way to do it, is I'm not going to get these little indentions in here if I do it that way. So as much as I hate it, I'm going to have to come in here in this blue color and create a link in this chain. And I'm doing them as a satin, point, counterpoint, finishing up here, coming back here, giving myself slide overlap. When I'm done, I go all the way around, I can then make some running borders. Now, if my running borders don't work, if it doesn't match up well enough, then, okay, running stitch. Start here. Just use your middle mouse button for your curves. And so on. We'll go all the way around. Now this design, once I've finished with the rope around the outside edge, it's going to sew out a lot better than what we have over here. Okay? Yes, took me a little bit longer. I'm still not even done. I've got to go through and do the tedious part of putting all those little links in there and putting a border around them. But at the end of the day, when I produce this shirt, I'm confident in this quality. I am not as confident in this quality over here. So image conversion has its place, and if you're doing simple shapes and things like that, then yeah, go for it. But when you get into complicated designs, it's probably not going to be the best option for you to use. I mean, I couldn't use this. To be quite honest, I don't think there's much in here I could use. I might be able to use some of these pieces right here, but probably not. Probably not going to waste the effort of making the changes to them. Okay? So when you're bringing in image files, there's a lot of different kinds that you can bring in. You can, some AI files come in there, but it depends on the version. Not all versions are compatible. I'm sorry?
That I didn't even think about the compatibility.
Yes.
I was just thinking that files could come in and it wouldn't be a problem, but
yeah, it's like that first file that we converted over here. This intention,
yeah.
It was an AI file, okay? But it's all about what version of Adobe Illustrator it was created in. EPS files. When you're saving an EPS file out of Corel or Adobe, make sure you're on PostScript level 3.
PostScript level 3?
Yep, that's one of the options. When you go to save a EPS file, there's some options, and one of them is the PostScript level. You want to be on PostScript level 3. Now, if somebody sends you an EPS file, no, there's two types of EPS files. There is the regular EPS, that is the vector file. There's a bitmap version of the EPS. If you try to bring in an EPS file and it comes in blank, one of two things have happened. Number one, it could be that they didn't use PostScript level 3. Number two, it could be a bitmap version of the EPS. If you go to Image and Insert and you look at our different file types, guess what? We have an EPS there. That's the bitmap version of an EPS file.
Okay.
Okay? Now,
okay.
DXF or AutoCAD is another good vector file to bring in. Okay? It's called
AutoCAD.
It's called AutoCAD, but the extension on the end is DXF. Now, one thing about a DXF as opposed to an EPS or an AI, it doesn't support colors. It is strictly a black and white or black vector file. You can still auto-convert it and all that and change it to whatever color you want, but when you initially bring it in, it's just black.
Okay.
Now, you can change it you can change it before you convert it. You can click on a piece, like for example, back in this intentions. See, I can click on a piece and make it whatever color I want before I convert it. And if I can, once I convert it, it will make it that color. Okay. You know, I'm not sure why they took those off the internet. That would be more of a, I mean, that would just be a question for them. You could, I tell you who I would email and find out is, no, let's see. Gene McCourt. Let me make sure I spelled that right. Hold on. McCourt. Nope, missed a C. This guy right here, Gene McCourt at brother.com. He's their head machine tech. If he knows anything about the videos, if anybody does, it'll be him.
What about when it tells you it's the hole's missing? What does that mean?
Well, when you get that when you're trying to bring in, you know, different file formats. Like for example, if you're bringing a DST file in, you want to go to the import alien DOS screen. If you try to go into open, you can get that message. What it really means is that it doesn't understand what the file is you're trying to do. In layman's terms, it just means that, hey, I can't interpret this file. Now, I might be able to through a different method, but the way you're trying to do it, I can't.
Okay.
But typically you see that a lot with like machine disk files, like DSTs and stuff like that. You need to go through the import alien DOS in order to read those in.
Now, is there an easier way where I have the brother, well, I've been working with Brother BS for 15 years, to convert those into the ethos, or is it just going to have to be individually?
Yeah, it's just going to have to be individually. You know, just open. Now, it's never going to go away that you can read them in. So what I just typically do is, especially if I'm getting a new computer or something like that, is I just group them all into a folder. I'll call them old designs or whatever, and I just you know, I just pull them from that folder as I need them, and as I open one up, I'll save it into my Ethos database. Or, you know, if I get to a point where maybe I've got somebody that I need to give them some busy work or something like that, I might say, look, do all the A's or all the B's or whatever, and let them go through and do, you know, a whole group of it at one time.
Okay. But can you open up a C&D file into Ethos?
Yes.
Okay.
Design.
Right.
Import. Melco condensed.
Okay. All right. I guess I forgot about the Melco condensed being the C&D.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeff mentioned that. Sorry, somehow got paused. Jeff mentioned that to put them on an external hard drive. That's a very good backup system. This external hard drive. Just make sure that, don't do like myself, I was an idiot, that you lock up or take care of that hard drive. I backed everything up on an external hard drive that I had sitting beside my computer. It was a great backup. I thought I was nice and safe until I was robbed, and they took my computer, and because my backup hard drive was attached, they took it as well. So,
Marsha had mentioned something about online backup, that she does one.
Yeah, those are really good too. There's several online backups that are very, very good. There's 3 or 4 that, you know, that are just fantastic. That that you could definitely look into. And then you don't. Then it's off-site, and so yeah, that's definitely a good option. It's a good option. Yeah. Yeah, Jeff. Jeff said he hides his. That's the smart thing to do. If you have a good hiding place or a safe, or I mean, even if I'd have just unplugged mine and probably stuck it in my desk drawer, I would have probably been fine because they didn't actually open any drawers in my desk. It was just the fact that it was attached, and when they picked up my laptop,
They took that.
they just pulled it with it. Took it with it. So, but anyway, live and learn. So, yeah, carbonite
And
is.
where do you live?
Outside of Atlanta.
Okay.
So.
I know we
Yeah.
don't even like I.
When growing up, I've lived in this town all my life, and I've always lived within 10 minutes of where I live now. And you're right. When I was young, growing up, we'd go for days. We'd never lock our doors, and
Yeah.
And just until the last 8 or 9 years is starting to the community's starting to get just a little rougher, and the police said they were only in here like 5 minutes, and they said it was kids. They knew exactly what they were looking for, and they just came in and sucked it all up. Sucked up what they wanted. So anyway, all right. So questions.
No, I got a lot out of today.
Well, it's kind of a different class. It's sometimes nice to have this smaller group because you don't have to, especially with this you guys, because most of you guys have had a little bit of the class before, so we can kind of be a little choosy about what we